was our first apple pie of the year.
Yeah, but it's not good like mine.
No, well, Baker's is pretty close though.
Yeah, well, I think they are with me.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm caught.
Welcome, everybody.
Wait, that's so.
Stand so
Sorry. Reset that.
pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, Supervisor Courier is absent. Councilman Barber?
Here.
Councilman Carter?
Here.
Councilman Salaski?
Here.
Councilman Van?
Yep.
We started, thank everyone for coming. We'd like to take a moment of silence for Deb's father, Gilbert Miller, that passed away. All right, need a motion to accept the minutes from August 28th regular town board meeting, and the September 17th budget meeting.
I'll make a motion to accept the August 28th regular monthly meetings, also the September 17th budget meeting, number 1.
I'll second that.
Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
And in the folders, you got the supervisor monthly financial report. And we'll move into Mary Johnson. You got the floor.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Mary. Welcome.
I didn't, have a couple of handouts. I sent some slides this morning. I didn't realize that Doug's father had passed away.
Yes, Dad.
So we'll have to follow along with the handout.
I'll give her mine.
Oh, okay.
That's fine.
Let's see.
I'll make sure she gets it.
Okay, that's great. If you all want copies. Thank you. Okay. So, Deb had asked me to give an update on the milfoil management on Chateauguay Lake. I'm Mary Johnson. I'm the president of the Chateauguay Lake Foundation. And 2024 is the 17th year that we've been managing milfoil on the lake. And for most of that time, we followed a plan provided by the Adirondack Watershed Institute. And at the time the plan was developed, the main methods were benthic matting to smother the plant or hand harvesting. And hand harvesting can be with or without the suction harvester. We've come to rely on the hand harvesting by the dive crews. We did try the suction harvesting one year, but for our purposes, it seemed like it was good if you had it positioned and you had a big dense bed to work in. But if you had patch and milfoil, it was the divers did just as good a job, if not better, swimming. So we've mostly over those years relied on hand harvesting. And with the support from the town of Dannemora, we've received support for most of those years, and the past 3 years, very nice, generous support that's allowed us to do 2 weeks of hand harvesting. And we've done that hand harvesting in the south inlet of the upper lake, where there's quite a large milfoil bed, and then the fragments flow downstream. So it's a preventative to try to treat that bed. Now, I wanted to, because there's been an interest, this year was a milestone year because we did our first treatment using herbicide. And the herbicide Procelicor is a reduced risk herbicide per the EPA. And it is reduced risk because it's very specific for certain plants, especially milfoils. It degrades rapidly, so it doesn't really interfere with uses of the lake. It's gone within a few days, if not 1 day in some cases. It works as, it's a plant, it mimics a plant hormone. So the way it works is it causes a plant to grow rapidly. It's a plant growth hormone, stimulates rapid growth. So the plant stem elongates, it grows so rapidly that eventually the plant collapses. And this can happen over a very short period of time. So it's reduced risk for animals, birds, fish, insects, invertebrates, humans. It's even been used to treat drinking water reservoirs. So it's a systemic, so it affects the whole plant, and it will dampen regrowth. For the manufacturer guarantees 3 years minimum, but in some lakes where it's been tried, it's persisted effects longer than that. So the first chart that you see there, the one that shows the bar graph, so that shows how milfoil has increased. We did a 2021 survey of all of the lakeshore. And that was the first time we'd done a comprehensive lake-wide survey since we did the management plan in 2006. We had done ones for different parts of the lake in years in between. But in 2021, we went back, and you can see when the first survey was done in 2002, and the rightmost set of bars shows the total for all parts of the lake. So in 2002, there was only 41 acres that infested with milfoil. So when we went back in 2006, Adirondack Watershed Institute did a survey. Along with preparing the management plan, it had increased to 200 acres infested. And this is along the littoral zone where light reaches the bottom. Then we went back a few years later, 2010, and it had increased to at least 263, maybe a little bit more because we didn't do all parts of the lake in that survey. So then, so those were 4 years apart. So then we didn't do another survey until 2021. So in that 10-year, 11-year period, it had increased to almost 700 acres infested along the shoreline. So this was almost half of our shoreline had become infested. So even though the hand harvesting was working in the areas where we were able to work, we weren't able to cover the whole lake. We were just able to cover certain areas because it's expensive to hand harvest. It's $7,800 a week, and with our budget, we were able to spend maybe an average of $45,000 a year. So we tried to do a week or two in each part of the lake, the Narrows, the lower lake, and the upper lake. And where we were able to hand harvest, we could see results. But in the other parts of the lake, we weren't sure what was happening. And when we went back and surveyed it and saw that how fast that it had continued to spread, we became very interested. This was about the time that they were coming on with the Procelicor, the herbicide. So we went to an APA workshop and learned more about it. And we decided it was something we wanted to pursue. So you can see, well, what we did, the APA has pretty strict requirements if you want to treat with herbicide. They want you to have a detailed survey, plant survey, not just the invasive, but all the plants in the area you're proposing to treat. They want you to take samples at every 1 acre interval along the shoreline. And they want you to report the plants that are there, how dense they are, the water depth, the density of all the vegetation, the density of the natives, the non-natives. So we did that, and we did that survey in 2021. A consultant team surveyed 1,300 points along our shoreline. So Chateauguay Lake is about 3,300 acres overall. And that compares to about 1,800 acres for Chazy Lake, just as a point of reference. So it took a while for the team to map all of that because the APA, again, they want to know all the species present. Chateauguay Lake had 59 species present. And we had to produce maps for each section of the shoreline. So that, we ended up having over 125 maps produced. The team that did the first survey wasn't able to complete the mapping, so we went back and had another team do it. Then we had a consultant who was knowledgeable, a lake management consultant, who also does herbicide applications, look at those results, look at those maps, and help us figure out a treatment plan. So the second thing you'll see there, and this is also in the little brochure I gave you with a little bit more background, but that shows the results of this plan, identifying where the densest milfoil was and outlining the beds. And so there were like 26 some beds, could be a few more. And he's identified them alphabetically. And you can kind of see almost the entire Narrows is infested. And then the inlet to the lower lake, a big infestation that we've been working on with the support from the town of Belmont. And then in the south inlet, that's bed W that you see in the upper lake. So we've been working on little bed I, which is called Indian Point, which was where the densest milfoil was. We've been working there. We've got that pretty much under control. And then we switched over to the east shore because that's where more of the camps are and more boat traffic. But that big central bed is a real challenge, and it's a large bed. So the plan the consultant came up with called for kind of prioritizing the beds. And one of the biggest problem areas has been the Narrows, especially from the boat launch to the sandbar. And, you know, boats put in at the boat launch and they go throughout the lake. So it doesn't matter if it's a downstream bed or an upstream bed, the boats go everywhere and they take the milfoil everywhere. So he recommended doing the stretch that we've had to do every year from the bridge to the sandbar and treat that first. And then move on up to the lower lake inlet. Again, these are both dense beds that boats can't avoid. And then do kind of wrap up operations on the rest of the lower lake and the upper lake and do the south inlet for last. Now the reason that the south inlet was kind of deferred for last for treatment is because, number one, that whole basin that you see there, that whole south basin, is forest preserve land. So the DEC administers that land. And it wasn't until a few years ago that they even decided, APA decided first that they were going to allow Priscilla. And the DEC wasn't too sure, that they decided they were going to allow it on state-owned preserve, but you would have to have a special plan. And they haven't come up with the guidelines yet for what exactly that special plan should be. So that's one consideration. Another consideration is there are native milfoils there. So we have 6 native milfoils in the lake along with Eurasian milfoil. And the native milfoils can also be affected by the Priscilla. So we're afraid that the DEC might take extra exception. The other thing is they've said they don't like the idea of treating along uninhabited shoreline. So all of that western shoreline is uninhabited. It's wetlands, uninhabited along the south. The eastern shoreline is inhabited. The problem is the milfoil fragments and floats and washes up on the inhabited shoreline and spreads throughout the lake. So sooner or later, we do expect that we will be approaching them to treat this area. But for now, what we're going to do is keep on with the hand harvesting. We're able, with town support, to do 2 weeks of hand harvesting in the South Inlet. And we're starting to make progress. And especially, another consideration is environmental factors. So last year, with all of the flooding that occurred, the whole South Inlet Basin, a big weed bed, actually washed out. The water scoured out the inlet, and a big weed bed broke off and it was floating around the lake. And they kept trying to haul it back and get it to stay in place. But what happened was there was so much silt that washed in that the water became very cloudy. And that occurred elsewhere in the lake too. There was so much sediment being washed into the lake with those torrential rains. And that continued earlier this year. We had 2 big rain events. So what's happened is the silt and sediment that's washed in has smothered some of the plant growth. And then the high water levels and the turbidity have helped to shade it out some. So when the divers went into the South Inlet this year to hand harvest, they reported that the milfoil was less dense and patchier than usual. Some of the plants, native and milfoil, had been smothered by the silt. And there was still growth. I mean, they were able to harvest, but the harvest was about 60% of what it was last year. So there was just less plant growth, less milfoil. So that happened in the lower lake inlet as well. The divers went there before we treated with Priscilla, and they harvested about 40% of usual, and they just said the milfoil is down. So that was the week before we treated. So we treated at the end of June. The divers had been in this lower lake inlet the week before. And the treatment area was that area from the bridge to the sandbar, right? You know, it's called, you can see where the bridge is,
Yep.
and then the boat launch, and then you go down to the Upper Lake entrance access, and there's a little bed called DD. So that's where milfoil fragments have collected along the sandbar, which is that kind of semicircle thing, and formed a dense bed. So our first year treatment plan was to do that stretch. And we treated June 28th, and part of the permit is you go out 8 hours later, 24 hours later, 3 days later, and you do samples to check for any residue. So as soon as, like, 1 day later, there were only 2 spots that had any residue, a couple spots of the 7 sampling areas. By the 3rd day, there was no residues anywhere, so that's how quick it breaks down. Then we went out and started looking for the effects. So we went out on July 4th in a pontoon boat and surveyed, and usually you can see the milfoil. You see the red growing tip. It's already starting to come up by July 4th. And all we could find were a few browning bent over plants. So we went up to the bridge and looked, didn't see anything. We went back out a little bit later, and same thing. So then the person who did the application, our lake consultant, came back in mid-August because he's supposed to do an assessment. And the treatment zone was from the bridge, but north of the bridge up to the lower lake was identified as a dilution zone, so possible impacts all the way down the Narrows. He didn't really expect it to have impacts all that way. But when we went out, we went all the way up the Narrows, and if you can't see because it's too murky or it's not good viewing conditions, you throw out a rake and you do periodic samples to see what you pull up. And we saw native plants, but we did not see any milfoil, did not retrieve any milfoil on the rake. That was, actually, that was the second survey. I went out first with the APA project contact to look at the site we were going to do next year, the Lower Lake Inlet. We went all the way up the Narrows, and he threw rakes, and we didn't pull any milfoil. So, didn't know what to think. So then we went back on late August with the consultant, all the way up the Narrows, Lower Lake Inlet, and then we proceeded all the way up the Lower Lake to see if we could find any. We could not find any. So, I think the combination, his opinion is the combination of the herbicide and the conditions kind of did a double whammy and really put a damper on the growth. So it was successful beyond our expectations, really. And next year we're not going to do the Lower Lake Inlet because we didn't find any milfoil there. So instead we're looking at some places on the Upper Lake where there is milfoil because it's upstream. So that looks like we're going to continue next year with another treatment. We're going to finalize that a little bit later this fall. And then we are going to continue. The plan is to use hand harvesting to kind of complement the herbicide treatment. So that is what we expect to do next year. Continue hand harvesting in the South Inlet and do an herbicide treatment somewhere else on the Upper Lake that's closer to the further downstream. And a question came up at your meeting last week about the expense of herbicide and compared to hand harvesting. And so I took a look, and the last page I did a comparison. Now, it's expensive because of the surveys that are required and the permitting costs that are required. So you're supposed to do a pre-treatment survey between up to 2 years in advance of when you expect to treat. That's the one we did in 2021, and they extended the time frame for us to 5-year window because they thought we'd have to negotiate with the DEC to treat. So, and then after you treat, you go back to the same spots and you recheck and see, well, what survived, what didn't survive. So those costs are very expensive for those pre-treatment and post-treatment surveys. They have to go out with a team and sample every 1 acre. So you'll see those are substantial because we wanted to develop a comprehensive plan. So that 5-year plan was kind of upfront costs, and but it helped us get an overall picture to kind of figure out our approach. Going forward, we'll just do the surveys as we need for the more immediate treatment window. But it's still likely to cost us $10,000 per survey. And so that's no way around that. But the treatment itself, we used a permit consultant because he helps develop a plan for where you're going to treat, what the water volume is, what the flow of the water is, how much concentrate you're going to have to use. So, and someone who's knowledgeable, you have to deal with the DEC, the APA, and there are 5 different, and also like a permit to use the boat launch, a permit for discharges and so forth. So there's quite a bit of permitting involved. So he helped us with that. Then you send out letters to people to let them know. So that was a cost. The treatment itself was $74,000 for 97 acres. And then the post-treatment survey, like I said, you're looking at $10,000. So the cost per acre worked out, excluding the upfront cost for the plan, to about $947 an acre. Now, if you look at what we do every year our treatment with hand harvesting, we end up going back to the boat launch. Now, what I put down here is our annual maintenance cost, because we spent more in the beginning to bring down the density in the boat launch, but every year we go back to that site. It's a 7-acre site, and we spend about a week cleaning it up. And that week, cost per acre, a 7-acre site, is $1,186. And if you look at it, we're talking with the treatment, it's going to last for 3 years versus the hand harvesting is not going to last. We found it doesn't persist. It keeps getting reinfested. So it is expensive, but so is hand harvesting. And I think we think it's going to be cost effective for us.
Good.
So I wanted to bring everybody up to date on what we're doing and what the experience has been. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I do have a couple questions for you, Mary. And number one, excellent presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the data you gave to us with this handout is just more information for us as the board to recognize what we got to do here in Shady Lake. But how did you find the talent to go on the team to satisfy the wants and needs of DEC? Where did those people come from?
Well, it's a pretty specialized field. So when we went out for the consultant, we went to there were a couple people that we knew did it. So for example, one is Darren Watershed Institute. They've done work with Rensselaer Polytechnic. They do plant surveys. Adirondack Watershed Institute used to do plant surveys, but they're not really in that business anymore. Another company is newer in Saranac Lake, so they're the closest, called Adirondack Research. And then we recruited for some people that have done work outside the region, in the New York metropolitan area, New Jersey, Long Island, and they had the lowest bid. So we ended up using them. But as it was, they were not used to the requirements of the APA that you have to do it every, 1 acre, and report this and that, and they didn't have the mapping capabilities. So we ended up getting the survey data, but then we had to go to Adirondack Research in Saranac Lake to get the mapping done. So they started to develop an expertise in this. They're expensive. If we knew somebody else, we'd send out a request for a proposal, but the people that do this work in the region are not that many. I know Lake George has done work in this area. They've used Solitude Lake Management, who used to be the fellow that we used as the applicator is also a consultant. And he had his own business. He has a background in environmental sciences, has worked for 30 years as a certified lake manager, and his business was acquired by this larger company called Solitude Lake Management. So Solitude Lake Management is in the business, but mostly they acquire smaller businesses. And so this fellow worked for them, he sold his business, worked for them for several years, but last year he split off from them because he didn't like the shortcuts that they wanted, so they could do, cut corners. So he started his own business called Ready Scout, and so that's who we're using. But that's who we used. He did the work for the feasibility assessment, then he split off from Solitude, and now he has his own company that does work. So,
So looking back at your first year of using the herbicide, would you have done anything different to prepare yourself for where you are today?
I guess we struggled with the surveys and getting the mapping done. It extended the process because the survey was done in 2021. We worked with a company to try to get the maps throughout 2022. And then last year we ended up going to another company to get the work finished up. So, that was the most difficult part of the process. And because of delays in the mapping, we were late, we didn't get our permit in to do the work this year until April, and we couldn't get on the APA's agenda until June. And then the permit from the DEC was only valid through the end of the month. Same with APA, so we had 10 days to accomplish it. So building in more time in the schedule, would help, and that's.
So the other thing I just want to give you kudos on is that your data collection from 2002, and I really can't answer this for Shazy Lake, but we've been fighting it for 15 years?
Yeah,
15, I don't think we have that kind of data collection for Shazy Lake. That goes back to saying, hey, this is this bed, this bed, this bed. So it's nice that you're able to see exactly where your stepping stones have been from 2002 all the way to 2021. So
Well, it's not sure. I mean, it's kind of you can't always see it. So the 2002 survey was a start. And then we're not sure if he got out into the middle of the South Inlet. Maybe there was some more there at the time. But between 2002 and 2006, there was a lot of logging going on the upper lake, on the back ridge of the upper lake. And people reported a lot of sediment washing into the lake. And so then between those 2 years, 2002 and 2006, we saw a big upsurge in the growth. And then when we went back, we worked with Adirondack Watershed Institute for a number of years, and they helped us with the mapping. And then then we didn't do comprehensive mapping. We relied on the reports from the harvesting team. So every year in their report, they show us where they've harvested and how many bags they've taken out. So if we keep track of how many hours they've worked and where they've worked and how many bags, we can kind of get a picture of what the progress has been. But we don't know what has been happening in the rest of the lake where we haven't been surveying. Now, I think Shazy Lake has been working with a fellow who's got a lot of experience in this. Larry Eichler is his name, and he is with the Darren Watershed Institute, or he was. He recently retired. And he's done a lot of this kind of work. And as I understand it, he did a study for Shazy Lake some years ago, and I don't know how many years, maybe 6 or 7 years ago.
I have no clue, do you?
But I know that they've mentioned that name before, that there was a study done.
It's probably closer to 10, I'd say. It was a while ago.
So it's difficult to get a handle on. That's why you have to kind of do these surveys, even though they're expensive, because for us it was a wake-up call. Now we're going to have to go back out and do some more surveys because conditions have changed. We're not finding any milfoil in the lower lake. Now we don't know what's going to happen. If the lake is going to clear, if next year, if this is an ongoing condition with these heavy rains that wash silt into the lake, if the lake water is going to continue to be high, but with all that silt, what's it going to do?
If it's a true weed, it'll come up through it.
It will, but we don't know what exactly when or to what extent. So it's a little hard to say.
Now the Persilicore, does that come in a concentrated format and they dilute it to inject it into the bed? Is that how it works?
it comes in a concentrate, and then he's got an airboat, so skims the surface and then mixes with the water, and then it's injected subsurface as a liquid.
So not into the soil itself, just into the water.
No.
So basically just,
It's not a granule. I mean, some herbicides, they have spread granules. But this one is a subsurface injection of the
but it
liquid.
does float down to the milfoil.
Yeah.
It's heavy enough to float down to the milfoil.
Yeah,
Huh.
it will disperse and the plant will take it up.
So when your 5-year plan, your mapping and your surveying, that cost is still gonna be elevated, but if you made that kill from the sandbar down, those are gonna reduce your costs by far, if it stays away.
Yeah.
Or the-
So we're gonna be moving ahead in our plan, basically. You know, we're gonna skip the Lower Lake Inlet for now. And we're gonna be able to move on to some of the other beds we were gonna do later. And, kind of take another, look next year and see what's coming back. And, go from there. But at least we kind of had mapped out a game plan, so we could kind of estimate the costs. And the costs that are in that brochure do not include the survey costs.
Okay.
So that adds to it.
And then how do they test to make sure that this Priscilla core is gone? Is it a litmus paper test, or how do they know when it's gone?
They take water samples
They do,
and they send them to a lab
okay.
to test for the residue.
What's the negative impacts of that, the fishing and people using the water?
Because it is effective at a very small concentration, much smaller than other herbicides that used to be used. Other herbicides, you used to have to restrict the uses of the water for maybe several weeks, up to a month or something. Priscillacor is low concentration, it degrades rapidly. So for example, it's just not detectable within 24 hours to 72 hours. So it doesn't affect the fish. We had someone who's very concerned about the effects of it on the fish. So we treated on a Friday, and on Tuesday he reported to the DEC that he observed some dead fish floating. So the DEC came out, and they looked, and somebody that was there by the treatment area, a former board member of ours, asked, "Are you here to check on the Priscillacor?" He said, "No, I'm here to check about a fish kill." He said, "But we did not see any fish kill." And he said, "We also checked the oxygen levels, and the dissolved oxygen is fine."
Yeah.
So the fellow who reported it actually did us a favor by getting them out there to document.
Okay.
So it does have some effects on certain plants like water lilies or another plant, coontail, but they come back, and that's what we observed. So there was some stem curl on the water lilies, but overall, we saw a healthy plant growth, healthy native plant growth.
Well, you're not standing alone with your outcome of your Priscillacor, because there's five other lakes that pretty much can mimic what you're saying here today. So, I mean, it's something I think as a board and as a town, we should actively pursue here in this lake, and just hearing you tonight gives us more data to understand. Just, we have a neighboring lake that did it.
Yes, and there were 6 other lakes in the Adirondacks that did it this year. And the results have been positive.
Excellent.
So it's worth consideration. Not, and I mean, the hand harvesting, they can work together to reinforce each other.
Yeah.
I'm sure they could recheck the zones, right, like you say at the boat launch every year. They're gonna spend 2 or 3 hours there looking around just to see if there's anything there. I mean, they don't have to be there a whole week, they're just only gonna be there a few hours,
Yeah.
you know?
I mean, they're nuisance native plants too,
Mhm.
that grow more than you want, that are, and people will often confuse those with the milfoil. They're not great to have in front of your dock, but that's the problem of kind of water quality and protecting how much nutrient is going in your water. And if you've got a lot of sediment going in your water, it's adding a lot of phosphorus, which is a nutrient for plant growth. So you know, overall, it relates to the need to kind of manage your watershed, and, you know, we could do more of that. To just reforest along tributaries, streams that are going in there. Because this rain and all part of climate change, I don't think it's gonna stop. So that is also gonna affect the lakes.
Great report, Mary.
So,
That's very good, thank you.
great report. I have two questions. So what year did you actually start fighting milfoil?
2008.
Well, it seems like,
Uh-huh.
I was at Live Mountain, we rolled a lot of that mat. Was the mat ever effective to it?
The matting works, I believe, works best around docks or swimming areas to control.
Right.
But when you're matting a big expanse, first of all, it's really hard to get it in place.
Well, you knocked the plants over, right?
Yeah, to place it, I mean, they were out in the middle of the lower lake inlet, a big expanse of water, unrolling those mats and getting them down, and they were weighted down with rebar.
Yeah, I worked on them a few times. We made
Did
a lot.
you?
We made a
Yeah,
lot.
the corrections people made those
We had a
mats.
roll there of that black material, my God, it must have been 4 foot high. We just unroll it and tie the rebar to it, then roll it up in sections.
Yeah, but basically you can't get enough coverage. So when you kill off an area of plant, which is what the benthic mats do, they kill everything.
Right.
So it's not selective. So if there's invasives growing around it, they're the first to come back. And it's like you've made it like a fresh ground for them to reseed. So that's why I say I don't think it's that effective in long-term milfoil
Right.
control. But if you have it around a dock and you have other plants too, you can. It's supposed to be permitted, but under a permit for hand harvesting, our general permit for the APA would allow us to mat around people's docks. But I think that is a whole other business,
Right, that's it.
you know. I mean, right now we're about kind of looking at the lake overall.
And how do you go about your fundraising? Do you do you have just say you have 500 camps between the two lakes? Do people specifically, does everyone contribute? Do you have a letter you send out? What do you, I know
Well,
you have a couple fundraisers that I think are pretty good.
yeah, we
Pretty good,
rely, for the most part, we rely on, we go out with a fundraising letter in the fall to all the shore owners, and we know who the shore owners are because we have the water district. So there's a Chateauguay Lake Water District. So we know who the property tax office has a list of who the property owners are. And then there are other people who volunteer, visitors or family members, so we add to our list. So we have a list of about 600 names that we mail to every year. And that accounts, the donations we get from our mailing accounts for about 2/3 of our funding. And then the Chateauguay Lakes Association gives us some money. The towns contribute about 13%, 14% of our funding has come from the towns. Events, we rely on events, maybe, our fundraisers and raffle in the summer. So that's another 8%. So that's how we get it. And it's a constant,
You got a lot upstairs there, you got them all down.
yeah, and it's constant fundraising exercise, and we have more. I mean, I think Chazy Lake has only 200 some parcels, so we do have a bigger base, but it's a bigger lake also.
Fair Lake, yeah.
But for the towns, we wondered early on, could we turn this over to the Water Level Control District, which is a tax district? Because we only get, maybe in response to our mailing, 25% of the people will respond in a given year. And over time, maybe about half of the people have given at some point. But then there are another half of people that don't give. So then people say, well, maybe we should have a tax district. But for us to have a tax district on Chateauguay Lake, you would have to have all 3 towns involved. And that requires either each town has to pass its own law, and then you have to have some sort of coordination.
Yeah.
Or else you have to go to the state, which is what they did when the water district was established, and they had to get state enabling legislation.
So are you a nonprofit?
Yes. So we're a nonprofit, so technically we can apply for grants, but there's very few grants for actual control work. A lot of the money that's available out there is for prevention, regional organizations that do education. We are not part, so the Lake Champlain Basin Program is great, and Chazy Lake can take advantage of it because you're in the it's in the Lake Champlain Basin.
The lake feeds Lake Champlain, so.
But Chateauguay Lake does not. So we do not have access to those grants, which is, and there's no similar, we go into the St. Lawrence, and there's no similar program like that makes those grants available to small local organizations. So that is a need. The DEC has a grant they come out with every year, 3 years or so, and it's like $2 million for aquatic invasives statewide.
Crazy.
It's not enough. Not enough at all.
You know, and that's the part that I struggle with the state we live in and the DEC and the APA, is that they talk out of both sides of their mouth. You know, they want water quality, they want pristine lakes that, you know, survive on their own, but they don't do anything to support the community to let that happen.
It is a real gap in the funding, is that there's no support for local groups, you know,
I
to
mean,
do
for me
this.
to even take stones out of the lake, I gotta have a permit, and they wanna know what kind of stones they are. Excuse me? It's a stone. I come out of my field probably 100 years ago. But you wanna give me a hard time about trying to get milfoil out of our lake when it's an invasive species? I mean, it's just, I think the state has got its head in the wrong place, and I think that we need to put more pressure on the state to take over control of these invasive species that are in our lakes. And I'm just not talking plants, I'm talking fish too.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. I mean, it's a big problem, and if they want the tourism economy and they rely on the lakes for taxes and for, you know, economic growth, but there's not very much money to protect the resource. There's money to promote tourism, but not money to protect the
Yeah.
resource.
so that's why they talk out of both sides of their mouth.
Yeah,
Disheartening.
you're preaching to the choir. All right, thank
Thank
you.
you,
I
Mary.
appreciate you did a really good job, and if you can keep us updated on the future. It's really interesting to see.
Any more questions on the floor for Mary? No?
All right.
Public comment, anybody has the, bring on the floor? Oh, let's see, resolutions, motion to approve September 2024 bills.
Make a motion to approve September 2024 bills for the total of $18,377.42.
No second.
Any more discussion? Roll call, Jim?
Yes.
Jason?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Joey?
Yep.
Okay, old business, sand hauling. We're at a total of 30,352 tons hauled out of the pile so far this year, and they should be slowing down soon for most of our quota. We're at 39,000 ton last year. Jason, you got any info on Canada?
So we're coming Tuesday, Wednesday, so I'm gonna meet them over here Tuesday morning.
This coming week?
So everything should be done here by Wednesday afternoon.
And the old stuff that's here? The old camera stuff that's here?
We'll have it, I think,
Yeah,
and
no.
we'll keep it, I mean, I don't know what we'll do with it, but we'll keep it. Maybe, discussion down the road, I mean, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, I didn't know if they looked at it, but they don't want nothing to do with that.
I don't think so.
It's obsolete anyway, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll keep it, we'll discuss it, what we'll do with it.
Dam repairs to, start taking place in the next couple of weeks. Debbie's got it marked down as a construction zone, no spectators, so maybe we'll get, Mark in here and put some, blockades or something up, so we keep the public out of there. There'll be a crane in there at some point, divers. Anybody else got any old business? business, we gotta schedule a public hearing for a local law for exceeding the tax cap, which is, we do it every year. It's nothing that, means that we're going over it, it's just something we have to do for, I don't know,
It's like a precursor.
for precursor, I guess. We do it every year, but we've never, in our preliminary, budget, we're not gonna. we're gonna
Well, if you
stay-
don't put it in there, then you go over the cap, you're not, then you can't. So
Yeah, you have to.
If you have something that comes up and then you end up having to, this is in place.
Yeah, we've never went over it for the amount of years I've been in here, but we've always did it.
It's just a safety valve, basically all it is.
Any other new business?
Need a motion for that.
Motion for public hearing.
The 23rd, 4:45.
Yeah,
I'll make the motion,
I'll second.
sorry.
Any more
Yeah.
discussion? All in favor? Anybody opposed?
No, so it's gonna be, I just wanted to put it out there so everybody knows, it's gonna be October 23rd at 4:45.
Yeah, we have it up there. That's the only thing I can remember today.
Anybody got any more new business?
I see we're hauling all the sand, we must be getting close to filling our,
Well, it's
right to the
yard.
Yeah, it's-
You figured you only needed like 100 loads, and then, but it was 2/3 full from last year.
where are we getting bulldozer from? Whose is that?
Taylor, I don't
Oh, okay,
know.
that's a smart idea.
Jason, you got any committee reports?
So EMS, they just had to wait on lettering it, they were up there stripping it Monday, it was supposed to be done Tuesday, I haven't stopped to see if it's done, but once it's lettered, they gotta submit the pictures to the state, and just wait for them to approve it. They can, hold it to, site inspection, but we'll wait and see what they say. But once that's lettered up and everything, just waiting on the state to give the approval. Once they give the approval, they can start using it.
Start using it. Beautiful.
And so everybody knows they've been coming up the line out quite a bit.
I've seen go by the house. They're not going by at a fast rate, so you know they're going.
They come out quite a bit, they, whatever, they come out, wash the rigs or whatever and check everything out. They gotta start doing their checks on both ambulances now, so they gotta come up and do that one and the drug box and stuff like that, so things are looking good.
Joey?
No, good. No, I'm glad that we're out with the EMS. It's been a long damn road, but, looks like we're getting some,